Good morning. Good morning and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Society of Schenectady. I'm the Reverend Lynn Gardner, she or they, and I serve along with Reverend Wendy Bartel, name not pronouns please, and we serve as co-ministers here.
Today, we are having a question service. A question box was placed on the table back there for the month of June. Folks put questions in the inbox. We gave people the opportunity to email, but none were emailed. Well, we get email questions all the time, but not specifically for this service. A few weeks ago, one of our fantastic curious kids here, Theo, where are you? Theo, asked a really important question. What is a ministry? Such a good question. If we told you all the things we did every day, you would be like, because sometimes that's how we are. But today we're going to talk a little bit about that as our time for all ages, to give a sense. You are welcome to hang out in a chair, that's just fine to be there. After our time for all ages, folks are going to go have an awesome time out in the backyard. But for now, today's answer, that's important, today's answer, is a Unitarian Universalist minister is one who feels called to minister to people who need ministry. But because using the word to define itself is one of those things most of us have been taught not to do, we're going to say a little bit more than that. In the technical sense, in Unitarian Universalist religion, a minister is a person who experiences some kind of calling to serve Unitarian Universalism. That in and of itself could be an entire service. Because each of us may be called to any number of things, not just ministry, but the work that you do to raise children, to be a social justice advocate. There are lots of ways to be called. Okay, back to this question. Having experienced a calling, one then applies to, gets accepted to, hopefully, attends, completes, and graduates from an approved seminary. A minister has to complete a 10-month internship, full-time, sometimes people do it part-time over 2 years, and at least 10 weeks of a chaplaincy training program, most often in a hospital, but not always, and completes the many requirements of the Ministerial Fellowship Committee, also known as the MFC, of the UUA, we love our acronyms, and gets cleared for preliminary fellowship and ordination. It takes 2, 3, 4, 7, 10, 12 years for some people. And is ordained then by at least one congregation to be a minister. That means that a congregation believes in your ability to serve Unitarian Universalism and affirms the MFC's assessment of one's skills, temperament, and commitment. It is an arduous and expensive process. We were each ordained by our home congregations and given a stole, with each of us been wearing, that acknowledges our role and responsibility, yoking us, symbolically yoking us to all those who came before us and those who will come after. Now, there are some variations on that path to becoming a minister, but that's the most common path. And it's also the short version.
Sometimes a minister works as a chaplain in a hospital or in a prison, in the military, or for first responders. Sometimes a minister works in a congregation. That's the type of ministers we are, co-ministers. We are co-equal, side-by-side ministers who serve this congregation of UU Schenectady. In this place, a minister is someone who cares a lot about you and your families. This might mean supporting you during a really hard and heartbreaking time. Sometimes it means celebrating your joy with you, a little high five for the fun things that happened that week. We're here to support your free and responsible search for truth and meaning, to sit with you as we grapple with life's biggest questions about being human and life and death and God and not God and good and evil, about how to build beloved community alongside one another, where we can all learn how to be better, how to be as good a person as we can, to be kind, to comfort you, to comfort one another in hard and challenging times, to open our minds together, to encourage people to maybe get off the couch and work for justice, or to sometimes stop arguing about the things that don't matter so that we can tend to the things that do. Sometimes ministers tell stories. We like that part. Sometimes we share our religion's history. Sometimes we teach lessons about how to choose what's right and good in life. Sometimes we advocate at the Capitol or speak at vigils or meet with community leaders. Sometimes we sing. Sometimes we call out harmful behavior, and sometimes we call one another back into right relationship. All those things. And we don't do it alone. We do it with all of you.
Sometimes ministers offer answers. Much of the time, we just keep asking questions. Or we sit with you in the not knowing as we try to figure out some of those answers. We like to ask deeper and deeper questions about the meaning of life and our human place in it. Sometimes we cry with the heartache of the world, with your heartache. And sometimes we laugh at the amazing joy and beauty and privilege it is to serve. A lot of times we do both because life is oh so very complex. We try, and some weeks are successful at making time for spiritual practices. Those are things like meditation, or maybe art, or reading poetry, or writing poetry, or sitting outside and just watching these amazing trees, or the flowers, or bees buzzing, or connecting together in worship or meditation here. And we need to make that time, and we encourage our new members and encourage anyone to make time to take care of the ways in which to take care of your essence, your spirit, your soul, your being in a spiritual practice that helps you feel more grounded, helps us feel more grounded, helps us feel more connected and centered. And we do that primarily because people call us when there are really hard things happening. And we need to be able and prepared to the best of our ability for other people to lean on us without crumbling ourselves. Of course, sometimes we crumble a bit anyways, because we feel empathy. We are human persons after all, and we know that life hurts sometimes. Much of our week, on the weeks that we work, are spent about 20 hours a week preparing for this hour and 15, about 20 hours, researching, communicating, pondering, researching, writing, erasing, writing, thinking about songs, meeting with people who are participating in the service, designing a ritual, researching a ritual, finding just the right words for the chalice lighting, picking the hymns, all those things. That's about the average. If you were to ask Unitarian Universalist ministers across the spectrum and some other faith traditions too, that's about the average. Sometimes it's 15 or 16, sometimes it's 22 or 24, but around 20 hours a week. Do you have any other guesses for what we do the rest of that week? Somebody once asked us what we did for a living if we only do this for an hour. Christy, I appreciate your laugh. What are some of the other things you've seen us do? Theo, what are some things you've seen us do as ministers? Oh. Both of those questions are good.
Yeah.
What are some things you've seen us do besides this? Meetings. Lots and lots and lots of meetings. Committees, memorial services, weddings, working with the board.
Community up.
Community outreach. What did you say? Email.
Yeah.
Email.
Leading groups.
Leading
Like
groups.
the grief group.
Yes, like the grief group. Yes. Visiting the ill. Pastoral care. Advocacy.
Planning.
What was that? There was something else over here.
Marches.
Marches.
And
Thank
the
you.
staff.
And the staff.
Supporting the
Yes,
staff.
supporting staff for sure. Yeah. Admiring really cute little kids. Hiring. Yes. Onboarding, staff, all those things. So yes, we supervise and care for our staff. We serve our professional association, the UU Ministers Association. I'm on the board of that organization. Lynn is a good officer. We strive to keep up with what is happening in the wider community and the world that might shape or impact our shared ministries in this congregation. We take continuing education classes so that we can continue to learn and grow and improve. We make decisions. We make decisions all the time, some of which we've been trained to make. Some of which we rely on you to help us make. Sometimes we ask for input so that we can make the best decision collectively that we can, and sometimes it's our responsibility to make those hard decisions. And there are lots of those questions and topics and things that are not covered in seminary. Like, what do you do when your congregation has a fire? Which we did in the fall of 2020. We had a fire downstairs. Yeah, that was a tough one. Or like, what to do when you have a global pandemic. They didn't cover that in seminary. Did they cover that in any other schools anybody else went to? No, yeah. Maybe some healthcare professionals, maybe.
Right.
Like what to do when we want to do energy efficient improvements to our buildings, but we don't have the money. Like how to protect the separation between church and state. Hello. Really important this week. Like how to protect and inspire and to which we have been entrusted, the generosity and financial stewardship of the institution, of the buildings, of the property. And yes, email and meetings and meetings and email and email and meetings. We also squeeze in some collegial connections, volunteering for causes that we care about, tending to our Unitarian Universalist denomination, like with the big changes that were approved at this year's General Assembly with Article 2, and sometimes much smaller ways, like sending a picture of our chalice to the people who were leading the service on Sunday last week at General Assembly. Big ways, little ways. If you haven't seen that clip, Kristin posted it on Facebook for those of you who use Facebook. And I would say all of that is important, and all of that is what many ministers do. And many of those things are things that lay people do too. There are some differences in our responsibility level, right? Differences in our time spent. But I'd say perhaps most importantly, we serve this Unitarian Universalist faith, keeping love at the center, even when it is hard to do sometimes. Striving to live ethical and compassionate and trustworthy lives, no matter where our ministry position is located. So, dear Theo, and anyone else who wonders, what is a minister? A minister is someone who experiences a type of calling to serve this faith. Some might say to serve God. Some might say to let the mystery be. To serve people at their most challenged times and to celebrate their love and joy. A minister is a person who works for justice and works to create deep connections, who wrestles with life's most profound questions, and who longs deeply for meaning making through ritual, worship, and presence. Our reading this morning is from Rainer Maria Rilke.
According to Goodreads, a great website for inspiring quotes that are from accurately named sources, in 1903, a student at a military academy sent some of his verses to well-known Austrian poets, requesting an assessment of their value. The older artist, Rainer Maria Rilke, replied to the novice in this series of letters to a young poet. An amazing archive of remarkable insights into the ideas behind Rilke's greatest poetry. And this text is Letters to a Young Poet as translated by Reginald Snell. Rilke wrote, "In the great silence of these distances, I am touched by your beautiful anxiety about life, even more than I was in Paris, where everything echoes and fades away differently because of the excessive noise that makes things tremble. Here, where I am surrounded by an enormous landscape which the winds move across as they come from the seas, here I feel that there is no one anywhere who can answer for you those questions and feelings which, in their depths, have a life of their own. For even the most articulate people are unable to help, since what words point to is so very delicate, is almost unsayable. But even so, I think that you will not have to remain without a solution if you trust in things that are like the ones my eyes are now resting upon. If you trust in nature, in the small things that hardly anyone sees and that can so suddenly become huge, immeasurable. If you have this love for what is humble and try very simply as someone who serves to win the confidence of what seems poor, then everything will become easier for you, more coherent and somehow more reconciling, not in your conscious mind, perhaps, which stays behind, astonished, but in your innermost awareness, awakeness, and knowledge. You are so young, so much before all beginning, and I would like to beg you, dear sir, as well as I can, to have patience with everything unresolved in your heart, and to try to love the questions themselves as if they were locked rooms or books written in a very foreign language. Don't search for the answers, which could not be given to you now because you would not be able to live them. And the point is to live everything. Live the questions now. Perhaps then, someday far in the future, you will gradually, without even noticing it, live your way into the answer. Perhaps you do carry within you the possibility of creating and forming as an especially blessed and pure way of living. Train yourself for that. But take whatever comes with great trust. And as long as it comes out of your will, out of some need of your innermost self, then take it upon yourself. Don't search for the answers, he says, which could not be given to you now because you would not be able to live them. And the point is to live everything. Live the questions now. Perhaps then someday, far in the future, you will gradually, without even noticing it, live your way into the answers. We Unitarian Universalists cherish questions, seeking deepening understanding as we lean into the mystery and all that which we cannot, at least now, perhaps, know. During our Getting to Know UU class with newcomers, participants are invited to name some of the big questions that they bring with them to UU Schenectady. In the past year, folks have asked things like, what does it mean to be a good person? What happens after we die? What do we mean by spirit or spiritual? If people have inherent worth and dignity, where does evil come from? Why do bad things happen to good people? These and many more are questions that are with us whenever we gather in community, not just with newcomers. Some of us have been asking those questions for decades. Some of what we didn't answer during the time for all ages when we responded to what is a minister, because that answer does keep unfolding as we live into that answer, includes the ways that seminarians need to demonstrate competency in at least 8 different areas: a preacher, a teacher, a pastor, a scholar, a theologian, a prophet, a priest, and an artist. The MFC adds more. Those were just for seminary. Sometimes these 8 areas are a little bit distinct, but most often they tumble and weave and intersect with one another. You've observed many of them just today. The preacher is probably pretty obvious, but sometimes from the pulpit, we're striving more to be teacher, conveying our history or sharing some new insight into what it means to be a UU right now. Other times we are striving in the realm of what it might mean to be a prophet, to cast a sense of vision for a more just and peaceful world, speaking truth to power, and calling on us all to grapple with heterosexist patriarchy and white supremacy culture. A theologian in Unitarian Universalism invites a congregation and also the attendees to explore one's own personal relationship with a larger truth, or the spirit of life, or God, by whatever name works, to recognize what is beyond our capacity to know, and to actively embrace and or struggle with our human capacity to remember that each one of us is worthy of love. Even as we deem that all behavior is not okay in beloved community, while also tending to the collective theologies present in the congregation. It's one thing to come to one's own conclusion. Tested in community is a whole nother thing. The pastor is present in the sorrows and pain and challenging parts of life, to listen, to be present, to bear witness to life's unfolding with you. Sometimes we offer advice or gentle guidance. Sometimes you come to us. Sometimes we come to you, wherever you are. That might be at home or the hospital or a nearby park or a coffee shop or Zoom or in person. The pastoral part of our calling means that sometimes we alter our plans to be present with you in the times that are heartbreaking, when the world has upended and makes no sense. The scholar somehow finds time to read. Because Unitarian Universalism draws from so many sources, reading might be from some religions' holy scriptures and seeing what, if anything, applies to our lives today. Others from our observations of humans, being human, peopling. Sometimes we're reading a book on governance, as your board will be this summer. Sometimes it is about sustaining life on earth from a place of faith. Stay tuned to learn more about the upcoming UU Climate Revival coming in late September. Maybe it's a blog or a newspaper or a UU World magazine or newsletters or a quick headline. There are so many sources for learning and growth. The area of priest is about rituals. The in-gathering service, bread communion, flower ceremony, coming of age services, bridging for our graduating high school seniors, honoring the equinoxes and solstices, child dedications, new member welcomes, weddings, memorial services. There are lots of rituals. Some are expected. Some are not. We've blessed people's homes. We've helped people say goodbye to family homes. And this week, the UUA published a book on rituals, and a couple of our rituals are in there. It is an honor to be in the presence of other priestly practices, creating rituals for transformation, whether through the hardest times or the most joyful times of our lives. Each ritual is unique and created for those who will be present, which means we think about you when we prepare them. Yes, even you, if today is your first time here. We think about newcomers when we are preparing things. We think about people in the wider community. We think about people who are no longer among the living. We think of the people who have not yet found their way here. And then there's the artist, the storyteller, musician, poet, painter, in whatever form. A minister needs to remember the power of beauty to connect, to heal, to remind, to inspire ourselves and others, whether we are the ones who make the art or lift up the art of others. It is so important for us to make art, to make time to be present to beauty in this beautiful and broken world, to give us sustenance to carry on.
One of the questions in the question box was about OWL as an extension and expression of our UU faith. OWL stands for Our Whole Lives, which is an age-specific and developmentally appropriate set of curricula to engage with human sexuality, health, consent, and other matters that are important to Unitarian Universalists. We addressed this quite fully in a service earlier this year, likely while this questioner was teaching OWL in a different room. Unitarian Universalism affirms that each of us is worthy of love and dignity, and that includes our bodies in our many varied shapes, sizes, abilities, and sexualities. Here at UUSS, we've been offering these vital classes for children and youth for a long time. And recently, the Unitarian Universalist Association, the UUA, created a young adult OWL curriculum and an older adult OWL curriculum because times and bodies and science and perspectives keep changing. And maybe everything that you learned about your body in 5th grade health class or in previous relationships or from Google aren't enough for you right now. You might be interested in getting trained to facilitate either of these. And if you are, please speak with our fabulous Director of Lifespan Religious Education, H.B. Stedham. It's right back there waving, so that she can help you find a training or watch for when they will be offered in the future. We'd love to offer the adult OWL classes here, but need people to attend the official trainings to do so. And if you aren't interested in being trained, but interested in the classes, watch for those too. Some religions or philosophies teach us that sex and pleasure are bad or only for procreation. We value the vast human experience of pleasure and joy. We value consent. Consent meaning an active yes, not just the absence of a no. We value reproductive justice, in which people make decisions about their own bodies, about pregnancy, about gender, about sexual health at all life stages. We affirm that sexuality comes in a lot of stripes, welcoming and including people who are asexual, demisexual, heterosexual, homosexual, bisexual, and questioning. These curricula welcome the full range of humanity and human sexuality too. And as gender identity and expression continues to expand, so too does Unitarian Universalism.
Last week at the General Assembly, a business resolution was introduced to the delegates. A business resolution is not something that happens that often, but it is a really important part of the work of the delegates of the UUA. The business resolution was introduced affirming people who are transgender, non-binary, and or intersex. A couple of good amendments were proposed, and both passed. And when the discussion item was opened on the business agenda, as is customary, the con and the pro mics are available. The presenter has 90 seconds to present their case, and then we move alternately between the concern mic and the pro mic until there's nobody there to talk, or only people are in one line and not the other. I won't go into all the governance, but that was part of the conversation. And while Unitarian Universalists have come some distance on this perspective, I will say, as a person who identifies as genderqueer and thus under the umbrella of transgender, we still have a long way to go. For the past 6 months, A new team has been in the process of forming, the Rainbow Connections team, and many of them have observed similarly that some of us still have a long way to go. Some of the con speakers at General Assembly said ignorant and hurtful things. It was rough in those 90 seconds. But I also could see, as a person who's been out a really long time, these older, white, cisgender, heterosexual people's fear all over their faces. And somehow I still found some compassion. The world is changing, and it's changing rapidly. That can scare some people. Certainly there are things in the world that scare me. But that doesn't give them the right to say hurtful things or to quote debunked and out-of-date science. So it was also powerful to watch how many people in the chat and in the pro mic say really powerful, affirming, amazing things. And we're not in control, despite so much of our time often spent seeking it. We get to let people evolve. We get to draw boundaries for sure around what is and isn't healthy, what isn't good in community. But these folks who are so afraid, who are saying hurtful things, don't actually get to control other people's lived experience. Because the truth is that gender nonconforming people have been around for as long as humankind has been on the planet. But not everyone is lucky enough to have recognized this yet. The proposer of the business resolution, the Reverend Jakaran Olaoya, had 90 seconds to address any questions as the final speaker. That's a new amendment. That didn't used to happen. But that was a blessing in a particular case. Instead of giving any energy to the ignorance and fear, she spoke these words instead. The meme, there's also a short video clip that you can find online to see. Reverend Olaoya, with her sincere warmth and joy, leaned in, literally to her camera, and said, to my trans, non-binary, gender, etc., friends, lean in. I love you. I love you. I love you. I love you. If I need to keep saying this for 50 seconds because the tick, tick, tick was happening, I will keep saying it. These words over and over and over again. I got teary as I am now, and as I have every time I have watched this clip. It is powerful, perhaps some of the most powerful ministry I've ever seen done at a General Assembly. To turn away from the fear and turn towards love. That's what Article 2 and the change to love at the center has been about all along. And what this faith, when we are practicing it well, is about. You may not know this, but 617 anti-trans bills have been introduced in 43 states. 44 of them have passed. 348 of them are still active. 225 of them have failed. It's exhausting just to speak those ridiculous words in 2024. Some of those bills include things like not teaching LGBTQ history. Some of those bills prohibit doctors from providing gender-affirming care in the form of hormones or hormone blockers, or even providing routine prescriptions and healthcare to people who are transgender. Some of those bills prohibit teachers from using students' chosen pronouns, requiring them instead to use their birth identity. Thankfully, the business resolution passed with flying colors, with over 90% of the delegates saying yes. And we celebrate those results, even as we also recognize that there is more work to do in this circle and in the wider world to reduce the fear in non-trans people and decrease the harm of the trans community caused by those who are afraid. But the power of this business resolution is that in the states where these trans bills are being debated and or passed, it gives religious ground for teachers to say, my religion teaches me to use the pronouns and affirm the inherent worth and dignity of every student. So I'm going to continue to use this student's pronouns on the basis of religion. That's powerful tools. It allows physicians to be able to say, in my religion, we teach that we affirm people's bodies and that we give them the care that they need and prescribe them what they need to live their lives fully and to flourish with dignity and respect. Some of the work we do is really important in ways we hadn't even considered at the outset. This religious tradition gives us a great deal of power to make the world a better place if we would but use it gently and lovingly. And on a side note, and yet oh so related, there are several Unitarian Universalists who are plaintiffs in the case in Louisiana right now, resisting the 10 Commandments law there. We'll see what happens in Oklahoma and other places as this comes up.
Mm-hmm. Which brings us to another question. One that asked why we think more people might not be drawn to Unitarian Universalism's message of inclusion and acceptance. Well, 3 things come to mind. 1, some people haven't heard of Unitarian Universalism. Since many people who attend a congregation for the first time have heard about it from someone they know, maybe the question is actually, why don't more UUs talk about their congregation with their friends, family members, or neighbors? That question isn't really for us. It's for you. 2, because some folks aren't looking for an inclusive and accepting community. Some are looking for a religious community that says that they have the right and definitive answers. Unitarian Universalists value pluralism, and pluralism isn't for everyone. We don't need it to be. It takes some work to find your truth and to hold it firmly enough so that that truth can guide you, and gently or lightly enough so that it doesn't prevent you from being with others who are holding different truths without feeling threatened by them or diminishing their truths. Lastly, some people do come here seeking an inclusive and accepting community and feeling hopeful after worship and then during the social hour, and maybe nobody talks to them. Or maybe they don't experience inclusion or acceptance. They hear folks say things that are judgmental or careless or insensitive or worse. If they don't find a strong enough connection to folks who are not judgmental, who are sensitive and attentive to welcoming someone new, then they leave. Being part of a congregation, by whatever name, temple, gurdwara, church, masjid, synagogue, society, fellowship, takes work. Will people make mistakes sometimes? Definitely. Yes. We will make mistakes sometimes. We will all make mistakes sometimes. Will some people misuse their energy to get what they want and rather than what is best for the community? Yes. So we also need to practice direct address, talking to one another rather than about one another. We need practices of apology and practices of repair. The Board of Trustees is working on these policies and practices. And the rest of us can be working on creating a more intentionally friendly and welcoming environment by speaking to newcomers and folks we don't know yet with open-heartedness and curiosity, by inviting our family and friends to join us here, because there are lots of folks who might need Unitarian Universalism.
Another question that came in was asking about a favorite book that might help with someone's spiritual journey. We might imagine that there are lots of answers out here for people's answers, and we made a big pile of books here, but I will tell you that, if that question doesn't work for you, then don't answer it. So let's not yuck someone else's yum. If you were to call out a favorite book that has helped you on your spiritual journey that you think could help someone else, do you want to just call them out loud? Anything, any book.
Do you want to repeat for folks on?
No.
Artist's Way.
Bad things happening.
Bad things happen to good people. Falling upward.
Your Sacred
Your
Self.
sacred self. We have shelves and shelves and shelves and shelves and shelves of books in our home office, in our living room, in our front room, in the minister's study here, though most of those books are from prior ministers who are no longer among the living. But if someone asked us for book suggestions in person, we would ask their interests and what has been meaningful to them so far. We'd ask about your theology and what do you believe now and what beliefs have you let go and what are you leaning toward and what are you drawn toward and what are some of your questions, because each of us is on a different journey, even if also a related journey. There's a pile of books that we could have answered for you, but we're also starting to run out of a little bit of time here, so we're just going to leave that pile there for now and just know that those are some of the top ones that came to mind for us. Most of Rebecca Parker's work, most of Bell Hook's work, most of Thich Nhat Hanh's work, most of Pema Chodron's work, most of Mark Morrison Reed's work. There are so many books. And the words and images as we read, our reading is not a general passive activity for us. We ponder, we consider the other person's perspective and our own. How is what I believe about nature, humanity, divinity, justice, peace, my spiritual path shaped by what I just read? Do I agree? Does it matter if I agree? Probably not. They are sharing their perspective. What might I learn from that, with or without agreeing? We've noticed that arguing with a text is different from grappling with it on its own terms. Grappling feels like, to us, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. Open-minded, open-hearted, mining the words for their lessons rather than simply dismissing them because we might think differently. And sometimes we might still get to the dismissed phase because there are things that are just hurtful and just plain bad theology out there. And we value that freedom. There's another question about the words that we sometimes use to close our services. And in light of time, Chrissy, we're going to hold that. We have the answers. We have it all written out. It's all here. But we're going to save that for another time. Yeah? Okay. Excellent. We often will say salam, shalom, ashe, aho, namaste, amen, and blessed be. And the question was, tell us about the meaning of those and why we say them. And we would love to share that with you. But we also want you to carry on with your day too. So we close with a few questions for your consideration. What guides you when you have ethical choices to make in your life? How do you choose to live into the questions that come your way? How might you and your gifts contribute to the shared ministry of this congregation so that together we can live our way into all the answers, or at least some of them? May we hold the questions in our hearts and may we lean into really listening to one another's answers, knowing that they may change over time, inviting them to change over time. You are likely not alone in the questions that you have. Together in this religious community, let us learn to live into the answers alongside one another. May it be so.